Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thank you so much for clicking by. This is all wine education, wine enjoyment, really videos designed to get you into wine more, so maximizing your enjoyment. Now, these videos follow syllabus and key text of major wine qualifications, so if you are studying wine, these will work very nicely. This one actually is very applicable to the WSET Level 3. But if you're interested on topics like how to store and service your wine for this video specifically, then of course it's going to be really useful. Any comments or questions, please do get in touch by commenting on this video below. Perhaps you have a cellar, maybe you don't, you store your wines in a fridge, you've got recommendations for people. It would be great to hear from you. So in the storage and service and wine presentations, I've got two series, so how to store wine, and the second series is how to serve wine. There's just one video in this first series on how to store wine, so we're looking at really the storage techniques of wine. Let's rock and roll then to begin with. So in order to get the best out of your wine, it is very important that you store it correctly and you serve it at the correct temperatures as well. There's nothing worse than, of course, going away somewhere wonderful, having the time of your life, and selecting some beautiful wines. Perhaps you visited a winery, bringing it back, and then trying it on a 10-year anniversary 10 years later or something like that, and the wine is in poor quality, perhaps from the storage of the wine. That can be an absolute disaster. And you don't have to, like on the previous slide, you don't have to spend millions of pounds, millions of money to invest in expensive storage units. You can have really just a bit of common sense by learning some key principles that I'm about to go through, and then standard equipment, which is widely available and often enough to ensure that the wines are enjoyed at their optimum best. You'll see the picture there. There are problems that can happen. And I'll go through those as I go through all the next slides, because if there is poor storage, it can affect the flavor because there can be damage that happens with light. There can be damage that could happen through the cork drying out, like you see in that picture, which allows for premature oxidation and can make the wine sort of turn stale and in fact go very off. So there can increase amounts of faults in these wines. So it's very imperative that we get the storage correct. Now, we don't always have wines for storage, right? And in fact, we drink most wine very much ready to drink. We buy it and we drink it fairly quickly. Not all wines are destined for storage, but for the long-term storage, the temperature for the wines should be cool and constant. Now, in the Celsius, that's between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. And in Fahrenheit, that's 50 to 59 Fahrenheit. Got a picture with the parameters there as well. Why? Well, extremes of cold and heat could cause damage. Okay, so if you have fluctuating temperatures between hot and cold, this can cause the liquid in the bottle to expand and contract. Moreover, the cork itself can actually expand and contract, and that could let in more oxygen, which can cause the wine to prematurely age. One of the worst places in your house to store wine is certainly the kitchen. The kitchen often is one of the coldest places in the house when not in use, and that's often because of all the ceramic. And then it's one of the warmest places when it's in use, so you have big fluctuations of temperatures. Storing wine there long term will cause damage to those wines. Also, extended periods of refrigeration, so putting the wine through very cold temperatures, can cause the corks to harden and lose their elasticity. And that will result in the seal failing. And then you can get air, of course, with oxygen attacking the wine, and the wine becomes stale. So that's another huge issue. Also, for wines that have not been filtered and not gone through tartrate stabilization, if you keep a wine in a very cold condition and I'm talking very cold, in a fridge at sort of 5 degrees Celsius, for example, or let's say something like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, then it can cause tartrates to precipitate in the bottle and form kind of almost crystals at the bottom of the bottle, which could look a little bit unappealing to some people. They're absolutely harmless, but it could look unappealing. And also, we talked about the cork becoming problematic, perhaps drying out, as we've talked about, but also hardening and losing its elasticity. Now, imagine a sparkling wine. Okay, sparkling wine is going to lose its carbon dioxide and become flat, therefore, absolutely defeating the object of that sparkling wine. If you are shopping in wine shops and you are looking to purchase one of the more premium, say, champagnes, maybe a prestige cuvée like Dom Perignon, Le Grand Dame, or Cristal, or something along those lines, and it's in a fridge, be very careful, because if it has been in that fridge for a long time, perhaps because they don't sell it that frequently, that could actually cause that champagne to be flatter. It's better to purchase it off the shelf, or actually more preferably from their cellar or storage room. So that's temperature. Correct positioning. And of course, there's a lot of debate around this, but we'll go with what's currently in the WSET Level 3 textbook. Now, it is said that storing wine that is sealed with a cork closure, it is important to store it on its side, like you see in the picture just here. And that's moreover because the cork will then remain in contact with the wine, so the wine is therefore kept moist. If the cork does dry out, it could let in air. We saw a picture of that earlier, and that air can oxidize the wine. Wines that are sealed with a screw cap, and you'll see, in fact, there are a couple of bottles there in that picture, can be stored upright without any risk. Now, this is what is the kind of traditional idea about storing wines. But there's been quite a lot of research recently from the Australian Wine Institute by the cork company Amarim, through quite an important research and development director, Dr. Miguel Cabral. Now, they are basically saying that it's not imperative that we need to store wine on its side if it's a cork closure, because the essential humidity that you find in that gap between the cork and the wine, if it's stored upright, is actually 100%. So you're going to find that the cork is still kept moist, probably not as much, but still enough. So there is a bit of debate to be had around that. Another thing is, if you are in a cellar which has fairly high humidity, the cork is going to be kept moist anyway, so storing upright will actually be okay. But if you are sitting the examination, they do like storing wine on its side as the answer, just to put it out there for the level 3. One which is not talked about nearly as much as it should be is avoiding strong light. So this means keeping wine away from strong artificial light or sunlight. Now, both of those, the light can heat the wine, and it can cause the wine to become stale and old before its time. Artificial light specifically can cause unpleasant flavors to develop in the wine, but natural sunshine, UV light as well. Now, there's something we call light strike, much more discussed around beer, but it should be very much discussed around wine as well. So, light strike occurs in a wine. So, this is a fault of a wine or any alcoholic drink where the sun's ultraviolet rays flood the bottle. Now, this kind of excites the wine's naturally occurring riboflavin, that's vitamin B2, and pantothenic, which is the acid of vitamin B5. Now, what does this mean? Well, these energized molecules then react with the naturally present amino acids, and this yields sulfur containing compounds that we can smell at very low levels, and they stink. In America, they often call this a skunky smell, and you can smell this with quite a few alcoholic products. Now, I would be exceptionally careful if I was you with bottles which have no protection. And you'll see here on this slide, you have got a clear bottle on the right hand side, and I've got the phrase 3 hours. Because if that bottle, and I kid you not, if that bottle spends 3 hours in direct UV light, sunlight, or strong artificial light, that will cause damage to that wine. If it is green bottles, it's towards a day, so they've got much more protection. And then brown bottles are UV resistant. So with wine bottles that are brown, you are guaranteed very good protection. Green bottles, very strong protection, but clear bottles, no protection. It's very, very, very important you know that. Now, I am a winemaker, and we bottle all of our pink wine in green bottles for protection. Doesn't look sexy to most of the general public, but I don't care about that. I want my wine to be protected. Okay, so be careful about selecting pink wines specifically, and even white wines, which are in clear bottles. You must really make sure that they are not kept in sunlight. So it's very, very important indeed. Um, Vibrations, good vibrations, maybe, but we need to avoid movement and vibrations. That's really in order for the wine to lie undisturbed. So if it's a red, sediment could become disturbed, and that could alter the taste of the wine. But also, the kinetic energy, which is caused in movement and vibrations, causes a reduction in the tartaric acid in the wine. And this normally reacts with the succinic acid, causing pleasant aromas. So tartaric acid, succinic acid, two components here that create esters and pleasant developing characters. But if you're reducing one of those, there's going to be a reduction in that pleasant development. So that's something to think about. Vibration also increases the amount of propanol in wine, which reduces aromatics. It raises isomeryl alcohol, and that gives you an increase in acetone notes. And it also results in a higher refractive index, which makes the wine potentially taste a bit sweeter. The studies of this have been in the Journal of Food Composition and Analysis, and the article was entitled Effect of Vibration and Storage on Some Physico-Chemical Properties of Commercial Red Wine. So it's best to store it in a place where there's little disturbing factors. If you say store it under the stairs, there's constantly going to be vibrations there. If you store it on top of a fridge, constant vibrations. On the floor, constant vibrations. So better in a place like a cellar, for instance, or a wine fridge. And lastly, a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it really is relevant to keep your storage of wine. Make sure you keep your wine under lock and key, because teenagers specifically can significantly damage wine. And no doubt some of you have been in that position before, where there's been some pilfering, some rifling of your prestige wonderful wine. So make sure you've got some way of protecting your wines from those rampaging hands of teenagers who are looking to explore the world of alcohol. So that's the completion for you to make sure that you can store wine nice and correctly. Please do join me for the next part, which is how to serve wine, which is a much longer series. Once again, if you have any comments or questions, please do get in touch. It will be great to hear from you. And if you do find yourself in London, in old Blighty, please do come and say hello and come for a class, glass, or bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Goodbye.